All right. So again, your character is more than their attributes. Make your character a person, not a list of things. Their experiences and how they relate to them inform how they relate to the narrative, and in turn how the narrative relates to your audience. Depth, authenticity, and consistency are the vehicle that holistically create characters and narratives that are both memorable and impactful. Now, moving on from that incredibly dark note, let's talk about another movie where you can find depth and uncanny places. Despicable Me. All right, who's seen Despicable Me? Any of the movies? Who at least is tangentially aware of Despicable Me or the Minions, right? What do you think of when you think Despicable Me? Anybody?
Minions.
Minions, right?
Gru dancing at the end.
Dance number. Maybe some fart jokes, maybe Pharrell Williams' incredible soundtrack. Very silly story. So it sounds like most everybody in the room is aware of the movie, but for anybody who's not, general idea is you got your big bad, super dad, you got Gru. And he wants to be the top villain in the world. And he's very good at what he does. But there's a young upstart Vector who is a little bit better. It doesn't really make sense, right? Vector's a loser. He's the guy who, do you know who my dad is? Like, he's not really it. He can't fight, but he's one step ahead of Gru every time. And so Gru's like, okay, I gotta do something big. This guy stole the Pyramid of Giza, I gotta do something big. So Gru's like, I'm gonna steal the moon. And he goes and he's trying to get this loan from the supervillain bank to fund his endeavor. And he's denied the loan. They're like, listen, Gru, you're old, you're over the hill, you gotta be like this guy Vector. Vector stole the Pyramid of Giza, come on. Tell you what, steal a shrink ray so we know that your plan is feasible. He's gonna shrink the moon and steal it. Steal a shrink ray, let us know that your plan is feasible, and then we'll front you the money. So he steals the shrink ray, and he goes, he's like, hey, I got it, I'm ready to give me the money, and they're like, yeah, sorry, we're still not giving you the loan. Because it turns out the head of the bank is actually do you know who my dad is? He's Vector's dad, right? So Vector's dad turns around and he's like, yo, Gru's got the shrink ray, steal it from Gru, steal the moon, you'll be set for life. And so, he gets the shrink ray. Gru tries to break into Vector's base, can't do it. But then he notices these adorable little ragamuffins out selling Girl Scout cookies. And he's like, wait, people just let these little girls in their house because they're cute? I got an idea. So Gru poses as a dentist. He goes and he adopts these little girls, and he sets up all the trappings of the perfect dream life, and this is gonna be awesome. Now Margot, the oldest sister, she sees right through him, right? She doesn't trust him, but the younger sisters, they're like, oh, this is awesome, we're adopted, life is good. And over the course of the narrative, Gru eventually ends up choosing his career as a villain over his role as a father, and he ends up losing the girls, he's gotta fight to save them, whole 9 yards, right? Now, Gru on the surface is just, your fun, silly Steve Carell character. Which, speaking of Steve Carell, if you've not seen Seeking a Friend for the End of the World, one of the best dramatic roles I've seen the man in. But Gru wants to steal the moon. He's the guy who walks into an ice cream parlor and freezes everybody. How's that for irony? So he can get to the front of the line and not even pay for the ice cream. He's the guy who kicks puppies. But at the heart of it, Gru is a neglected little boy desperate for his mother's love. And we see these scenes referenced in a humorous manner in the movie, right? Gru is always being compared to his father, who was a better villain than he could ever be. And nothing Gru ever did was good enough for his mother. None of his accomplishments in academia, none of his accomplishments as an up-and-coming villain. When he builds a model rocket, okay, yeah, you built the model, but it doesn't go anywhere. When the model flies, okay, yeah, the model flies, but it's not like it's going to the moon. When the model goes to the moon, yeah, it went to the moon, but it's not like it's gonna come back. And she would always dismiss him with this, with anything he did. So everything that Gru does comes from the perspective of a neglected child desperate for his mother's love. And we don't hear a lot about Gru's dad beyond the fact that he was a renowned villain, but we don't see him in any of the flashbacks, so he didn't grow up with his father in his life either. Meanwhile, these little girls, they're at the Miss Hattie's home for girls, and Miss Hattie is your Nurse Ratched character, right? She knows how to be nice in the public, But behind the scenes, she's verbally abusive. She's emotionally abusive. Any little kid she doesn't like, she shoves them into the box of shame, right? And Margot's got to keep it together for her little sisters. And they get adopted, and maybe things can be better. But Gru is continually trying to get rid of these girls. He's dismissive when there's nobody around to have to keep up his front. And when he finally starts to step into that dad role, the penultimate moment for these girls is their ballet recital. They've never had anybody come to a recital. They've never had anybody come to anything they've done. But they've got a dad now, and maybe he does love us. And maybe he's gonna show up for us. But the timing to steal the moon coincides with the recital. And Gru is about ready to abandon his plans, right? He's gonna be for these girls what his mother never was for him. But on his way out the door, he's stopped by Dr. Nefario, who is his de facto father figure. He's the old man scientist who makes all of Gru's inventions and all of his schemes. And he's a silly character, right? Like he's trying to make, Gru's like, we need a freeze ray. You gotta make me a freeze ray. And so he makes a fart gun. And he goes, oh, I thought you said a stink ray. And Gru's, oh, why are you so old? Oh my God. And he's a silly character. But then we get this dark moment where he slams the door shut and he gets in Gru's face and he tells him, you've gone soft, boy. These girls have made you soft. They've made you lose sight of the mission. And you know why you're doing this. It was never about the moon. And he emotionally manipulates Gru. And Gru's looking at this man who is his surrogate father. And he's pushed into choosing his career over his children. And by the time he thinks he can do both, right? How many of us have thought we could do both? He doesn't get back in time, and not only does he miss the recital, but the girls have been abducted by the villain, no less. And Gru is furious, and he's gonna get his daughters back no matter what it takes. And he goes to fight to save them, but at this point, right, let's take another look at these little girls. What they've learned is adults lie to you, adults hurt you, adults betray you, adults abuse you, and you are the one person I thought I could trust, and you threw us away. So viewing all of that through that lens, we now have so much more emotional context and stakes for this scene. When you examine that scene through the lens of everything we just talked about, it takes on a whole new level of meaning, doesn't it? And it's worth going back and watching not just this movie, but the whole series again. Haven't seen the fourth one yet, but I'm sure it's just as good. They've knocked it out of the park 3 times running. So before we take our break, we'll talk about a few more scenes we can deconstruct. Anybody familiar with the thriller The Man from Nowhere? Add it to your list. So The Man from Nowhere is a movie about, well, it's almost like, okay, so who's seen Mad Max, the original Mad Max, or any of them really? And anybody familiar with Golgo 13? one of the interesting things about Mad Max and Golgo 13 is that they are movies that are not about their main character, right? In the original Mad Max, which it wasn't called Mad Max, I don't remember the name of the original, Mike, does it come to mind?
Beyond Thunderdome, or
That was the sequel.
Road Warrior.
Road Warrior, there you go, my man.
Before that.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
No, you're good. Yeah, so in Road Warrior, that was kind of the one Mad Max film that was kind of about Max, and it kind of establishes his character and his mythos. But when you look at the Thunderdome and you look at Fury Road and these other Mad Max movies, they're not really about him. Like, you get your scenes with him kind of early on, but they're largely about somebody else. They're about the young woman and her brother, I want to say, trying to deal with this horrible decriminalized colony they live in. They're about the people trying to survive the hellscape of the Thunderdome. It's about Furiosa trying to free these women from this horrible, horrible existence under Remote and Joe. And Max is just kind of the guy who just blows into the narrative, and he's the spanner in the works, which is another trope. He's the one thing that the villains couldn't account for. And so, similarly, The Man from Nowhere is about Taisik, but it's not really about Taisik. It's this little girl who's often left alone in this apartment complex. Her mom's a drug addict and a woman of the night. And the mom and her latest boyfriend at the time, they steal these drugs, and they decide, you know what, we're gonna sell these ourselves. We're not gonna bring them back to the boss. We're gonna sell them, we're gonna split the money, we're gonna be on Easy Street, I'm gonna take care of my kid, I'm gonna be the mom I always tell her I'm gonna be at night, and I never am the next day. And it goes about as well as you would expect it to. And the little girl has to watch her mom endure this horrible, horrible torture before the mom and the little girl are abducted. Well, prior to this, the little girl often goes to visit Taisuk, who is the office manager in their slum of an apartment. And he almost never says anything to this little girl. So she just comes up to him and she just talks to him, and she creates kind of like this little fantasy world where she's telling him all about her friends and her good grades and how great her life is. And she always makes these little mixtapes for him on her little iPod Shuffle equivalent. And she'll trade him a mixtape to use a ball, to use whatever she wants to use at the time. But as their interactions continue on, she begins to break and tells him what her life is really like. She begins to break and tell him about how everybody ignores me. They call me dirty. They call me filthy. They call me a parasite. Everyone turns their back on me. I bet my own mom wants me to die. But at least you always talk to me, even though he rarely ever says a word. Well, Taisek's the way he is for a reason. I won't spoil that reason for you, but it gives him a particular set of skills. And when the little girl and her mother are taken, Taisek's gonna stop at nothing to get her back. And when we have a quiet moment between these two characters, he has this soliloquy. He says to the little girl, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I turned away from you back then. When you want so much to get close to someone, you somehow get to pretend as if you don't know that person. Twilight Zone. Presumably you all are familiar with the Twilight Zone. Who saw the episode The Big Tall Wish? It's one of the earliest episodes in the first season. You can find Twilight Zone on most platforms. I encourage you to check out the episode. But the basic premise is you've got Boley Jackson. He's a boxer from the hood. He's the talk of the town. He's gonna deliver the hood. He's gonna make things better for people. But he's up against a boxer that he knows he can't beat. And along this, we have a few narratives going on at once. And you got this little boy, Henry Temple, who looks up to Boley. And as long as Boley's out there doing it, then Henry can do it. And like most kids idolizing their hero, they see all the good and not the bad. And meanwhile, Boley, he's dealing with life in the hood, life in the slums, racism, toxic masculinity, a failing relationship, debt, the whole 9 yards. And he is so broken down inside. And Henry is certain he can wish for Boley to win. And if Boley just gets this win against this guy that he can't beat, if he can just get this win, then Boley will believe that dreams can come true too. And life in the slums will be a little bit better. And Henry goes and he's watching Boley's fight. And he's praying and wishing and praying and wishing and praying and wishing. And throughout the whole episode, he's telling him, don't worry, Boley. I'm praying for you. You're going to be okay. I'm wishing for you. You're going to be okay. Dream big, dream big, dream big. And Boldy snaps. And he goes off on him. And he's like, dreams aren't real and you're too old for this nonsense. Let it go. Dreams don't come true. And he's back in the match and he was winning. But then a switch flips and he starts to lose the way he would be expected to. And that switch flips when we see Henry break. And he says, Boldy was right. Boldy's mad at me. Boldy doesn't like me. There's no dreams. And he stops wishing and he stops dreaming and Boldy loses the fight. I ain't gonna make no more wishes, Boldy. You was right. I'm too old for wishes. And there ain't no such thing as magic, is there? I guess not, Henry. Or maybe there is magic. And maybe there's wishes too. I guess the trouble is not enough people around here believe. Who's seen The Wolverine? Or any of the Wolverine movies? Who's seen Logan? All right. Fantastic action movie. Lots of comedy, lots of great stuff in it. I love the scene where right after being told, don't put your chopsticks in your rice, that signifies death. Very next scene, it cuts away and he's got his chopsticks upright in his rice again. And she's like, are you serious right now? But there's a scene that has a very interesting way that it recontextualizes Logan. Yukio has the power to see the future. It's one of her mutant abilities in addition to being a badass with her swordplay and some degree of superhuman speed. And the moment she meets Logan, she knows how he's going to die. And Logan's like, I don't believe in fate, I don't believe in destiny, don't tell me. I don't care. He's Logan, he doesn't care about anything, right? So we're led to believe. But when we're reaching the climax of the narrative, as Logan goes to Japan to deal with the woman that he lost and the danger that she's in and fighting a terrible representation of the Silver Samurai for comic book fans, he has this moment where he's not sure if he's going to make it out of this battle. And when Logan asks, how do I die? What he's really asking is the Silver Samurai going to kill me in this fight? And Yukio gives him the cryptic words, you die with your heart in your hand. Now, again, who saw Logan? Who remembers the last scene in Logan? After going through everything that he went through up to this point, after he's at the end of his life, his friends are gone, his family's gone, and he meets this little girl, Laura Kinney, who's taken from his DNA, and she's a genetic clone that he essentially takes on as his daughter, X-23, and she has his powers, she has his claws, she has his rage, and he starts to live for something more than him. And in the process of that, when Logan ultimately loses his life in the penultimate battle, he dies holding Laura's hand. He dies with his heart in his hand. And that scene takes on a whole new meaning. Who's seen The Croods? You can add to your list if you want to. It's a great family film with a surprising amount of emotional depth. And the kind of running thing is, if you do anything that's not safe, you're gonna die. That's what the dad's always saying, right? He's trying to keep his family safe. If you go outside, you're gonna die. If you go to that lake, you're gonna die. If you talk to that dinosaur, you're gonna die. And he's got this overbearing mom, she's ancient and she refuses to die. And it's always, every day he's like, oh, or his mother-in-law, and every day he's, oh, I hope she didn't make it. Oh, I hope she didn't make it. And then off camera you hear, still alive! She comes waddling out of the cave. And as they're going through their journey, and he's placed in a couple of incredibly uncomfortable circumstances as his young daughter is coming of age and discovering boys, and there's more tribes, and she's the risk taker. You know, the son, he's the good one. You know, he does exactly what dad says. But the daughter, oh, she's a risk taker. She's out at all hours of the night. She's riding dinosaurs. She's talking to boys, and he slowly has to begin to come out of his framework of how he believes is the best way to raise and care for his family. And it leads to this moment that they're facing this extinction level event, and they have to take a significant risk that has the father have to relinquish all control and take an action that he believes will save his family, but he's not gonna make it. And his son goes to him, and the son realizes this plan can only work if someone gets left behind. You're not coming, are you? When you make it, so will I. Who's seen Candyman? Most iconic line from Candyman. Be my victim. Tony Todd, right? Oh my gosh. Now, And we're almost time for our break, so I'll move through this quickly. I want to actually take a moment to reference Blackula. Anybody familiar with the movie Blackula? Yeah, I guess it's worth watching. I saw it as an adult, and the thing about Blackula that's interesting when you watch it, and you know what, watch Blackula. It's not very long, you'll get something out of it. When you watch Blackula, it feels like you're watching two different movies, right? There's times that you're watching this incredibly schlocky B horror movie, but there's times that you're watching a Shakespearean drama unfold with untold levels of emotion and depth. Well, William Marshall, who portrayed Blackula, was a classically trained Shakespearean actor and playwright. And he desperately wanted this to be more than just Black Dracula, ghetto Dracula, blaxploitation Dracula. He wanted this to be a story about the human condition. Not unlike the portrayal of LGBT characters historically, if you had a person of color, they had to die, they had to be the comic relief, they had to be the heavy, they had to be the gangster. And you could only really have a person of color if they were some manner of alien life form, right? They were set apart from humanity. They weren't part of the world as we know it. And by degrees, you still see that now, right? Like Gamora in Guardians of the Galaxy is very much black. If you look at even Sonic the Hedgehog, look at the soundtrack to Sonic Adventure 2 and the portrayals of the character, each one of the characters lines up with a racial stereotype. Sonic's a white skater kid, Knuckles is a black rapper, Rouge is Latina. Like, you can look at the stereotypes that informed these characters. That said, Rouge has a banger of a theme song, Flying the Freedom, stays on my playlist. So he fought for this, right? And you can even see the racial stereotypes that play at the time. The cover of this movie is a big scary black guy coming after a white lady. Like, come on, right? Well, 20 years later, Tony Todd does Candyman. Tony Todd is another classically trained Shakespearean actor. And it is another movie that feels like you're watching two different movies. On the one hand, you have incredibly deep moments where we're discussing the racial undertones and the racist, ritualistic slaughter that leads to the creation of the Candyman entity. And then you have these, I don't curse often, these batshit crazy scenes where you've got this psychiatrist sitting at this table and Tony Todd leaps out from under the table and he's like, Candyman's here! And he gets him with the hook and he's, kuh, kuh, kuh. And then the cops are coming and he's like, and he jumps out the window and flies off. And you're like, what is this scene? But Tony Todd also fought for Candyman to have depth and nuance and to be more than a schlocky B movie. And the most he was able to get were these scenes of depth that are in the movie. And one of the ways that Candyman's blackness was weaponized in the screenplay was there was an entire dark romantic arc between Tony Todd and the white female lead, Helen. Helen's the character, not the actress. Like, I'm blanking on the actress's name. And there was a dark romance that was supposed to build between these two characters. And that entire arc was cut from the film. Because even 20 years later in 1992, we couldn't have a black guy hook up with a white lady. And so the closest we got was the ballroom dance scene between the two of them. And even that was cut to appear more predatory in nature, but the original scene was supposed to be the culmination of the dark romance between these two characters that would make the inevitable betrayal that Candyman experiences hit that much harder. And so as if to make up for that, in the 2021 reboot sequel, we have the iconic line, "Tell everyone." And he's encouraging the woman who was the witness to everything that happens in that story. Tell my story. Tell our story. Don't let this keep happening to our people. Let our story be known. I got at least one gamer in the room, too, who knows God of War, who's at least tangentially familiar with God of War. So we're a little bit short on time here, so I'll just say God of War is a story about a bastard son of Zeus who fights to take down the gods after they cause him to lose his family. And the reboot decided to dig even deeper into the emotional depth of the character, and I guess re-sequel is more appropriate. And as he's dealing with his son, and he's not certain how to be a father, he's never really had to be around his son, we have these moments where Atreus is trying his best to make his father happy and to be the kind of person, young man that his father wants him to be, and he's always falling short, and he's always, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Don't be sorry, be better. But we also have these moments of solitude and depth with Kratos' character, this big, strong guy who almost never says a word throughout the first story. Faye, what do I do? Our son is not ready to carry your ashes to the top of the mountain, and neither am I. I do not know how to do this without you, but we cannot stay here. And this line means so much more than the initial delivery. We cannot physically stay here. The Norse gods have found us somehow. They've come after us. They've come after our son. So we can't physically stay here. We have to take your ashes to the top of the mountain, so we cannot stay here. A journey that Kratos comes to learn Faye engineered to force the father and son to learn how to grow together. But he's also saying, as a father, as a man, I cannot emotionally stay where I am. And my son cannot emotionally stay in his naivete. We have to be better. Oh, I had one more. Watch Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. It's a great movie. We're short on time. Let's take a break. 8 minutes, we'll come back. To quote Monty Python and his Flying Circus, now for something completely different. Let's open a restaurant together. And at this point, you must be thinking this guy's lost his mind. Well, food is a way that we relate to one another. It's a way that we relate to the world around us. It's cultural exchange, it's human experience, it's memorable. A scent, a taste, it can bring you back to a specific point in time. Wars have stopped and started over the dinner table. So we're gonna look at our character growth and development through the lens of opening a brand new restaurant and the dining experience. So you have the tease, which is your log line. That's what you look at in the paper, which tells you I'm a millennial, that I referenced a paper instead of a blog or a tweet. It's what gets you excited about what's to come. You have your appetizer, it's the premise of your story. Your first course is your surface level narrative. Your second course is adding more depth to your protagonist. The main course is building a compelling character. The aperitif is adding dimension to your supporting cast. And your dessert is your memorable and impactful conclusion. So this is going to be interactive. Have your pen and pad ready. We're going to go through. When we do this exercise, you can either adapt a story that you're already working on, or you can make something up brand new for the class. Either one is fine. I may or may not call on some people to share. So the log line, aka the tease. Who knows what a log line is? The first time I heard the term was 3 years back in a conference I was at in San Francisco. The log line is something that will make anybody who's a grammar nerd cringe, because you have to throw out everything you know about proper language and write an incredibly long mega run-on sentence. But your log line is essentially your one sentence statement that whets the appetite and tells people what your story is going to be about. So we're going to examine my novel Nora and the Eternal Water Wheel for this. And the log line for Nora and the Eternal Water Wheel: when a young homeless amnesiac is adopted into a blended family, she thinks her troubles are finally over. But when she realizes her nightmares of the flaming night stalking her are actually her memories, she must travel to another dimension and battle untold forces of darkness to save her world and ours. So this gives you a general idea of where the story is going to go. What you whistle, you read it, and this is the thing that makes you be like, oh, this movie sounds interesting. I gotta look for a trailer. I gotta learn more about this. So we're going to take just a couple of minutes here. And I want you guys to write a log line for a story. Like I said, it can be one that you're already working on, or it can be something you make up for the class, but just give us a one sentence: when this happens, that happens, but then this happens, and so that happens. That's the anatomy of a log line. And remember, as we get ready to share some of these, this is a safe space. We're all among friends, so this is a no judgment zone, so don't worry. All right, who would like to share their log line? Mike, go for it.
Okay, so this is a work in progress. So a graduate computer sciences major writes an artificial intelligence program that unlocks the mysteries of the universe and turns on its creator when she rejects what it tries to accomplish in the real world.
Very nice, very nice. It's memorable, it's compelling. I'm looking for the trailer. Who else would like to share a log line?
Yeah. A mysterious samurai drops in at a mountain inn and changes Cho's life forever when he asks that the inn be renovated for a visit by a powerful leader making a secret journey across Japan.
That speaks to my soul.
Well, I figured it would. I read some of your bio and saw that you'd been to Japan, and your latest book is in Japanese.
Yes, thank you. Yeah. I grew up studying Japanese culture and language and history, and Oh my gosh, the Battle of Sekigahara, Honoji Temple, that's awesome. Anyone else care to share the logline? Yeah.
A young Latino narcotics agent suffers tragedy and loss but finds his own justice.
Okay, I like it. I like it. It sets up our stakes. It entices us as to where the narrative's going to go. It's a personal and relatable narrative. Awesome. Anybody else? All right, fair play. So we've teased our audience, we've enticed our audience, and now they've looked at trailers, or they've looked for the foodies that are reviewing our restaurant. They looked at trailers for our movies. They're looking at the interviews with our actors. So the next step is taking them from that tease to that appetizer. And that's building upon your log line and expanding that to your premise, which is your appetizer. So the premise of Nora and the Eternal Water Wheel: a 7-year-old girl awakens alone in a field with no memories and no one searching for her. She spends the next 7 years alone on the streets. A woman named Brittany finds and adopts her, raising her with help from her cousin Kambiri, giving her the name Tanielle. Tanielle's dream life is disrupted by nightmares of a flaming knight, the tall man, stalking her. Dreams of life as another girl, and sights and sounds no one but she can perceive. Tanielle realizes these are not dreams but memories, and she must return to her home world of Latondra to reclaim her birthright as Princess Noriel of Elara, repair the Eternal Water Wheel, and duel the Servant of Darkness, the Tall Man, who is in fact her father, King Hezria, corrupted by darkness. So you see how we've taken the logline, the initial tease, and we've expanded upon that more so, right? This appetizer, this is what sets expectations. This is what gives an idea of the vehicle of the narrative, where it's going to go, what we're going to experience. This is what further expands and lets your audience know, is this for me? Is this something I'm interested in? Is this something that is appropriate for me and my family, for my age group? Is this something that aligns with my interests? Is this something that I want to go and spend money on and that I want to engage in this experience? Is this something that is going to compel me? Is it going to be memorable? Is it going to be where I want to spend my non-renewable resource of time? So we're going to take a few minutes now, and I want you guys to take your log lines and expand them to a brief premise, which is sort of kind of exchangeable with an outline. Outlines tend to be a little bit more rote, but just do a brief premise for your stories now.
It should be, what, about one paragraph maybe?
About a paragraph, that's good. All right, who would like to share their premise?
Oh, fine. Okay, I'll go. Okay, so again, mine was the computer science idea. So a graduate student volunteers to assist in writing a program to capture a religious extremist terrorist, only for that program to learn all there is to know about God. The program decides to worship the student as a creator. The student rejects this treatment, enraging the program, which turns demonic on its creator's rejection.
Interesting, interesting. AI is a very relevant thing for our time now, and we can also delve into a lot of emotional territory to explore there, and a lot of fascination with theology as well. Fantastic. So we have our logline, we have our teaser, we have our premise, which is our appetizer. So now we're going to develop the foundation next, leading into the first course, which is your surface level narrative or your surface level character arc. Now this goes back to the beginning of the workshop where I talked about making your character more than a list of attributes. We're going to start with just some attributes about Tanielle. So at the surface level, this foundation, some basic attributes about Tanielle and about the story. It stars a young female lead, it stars a person of color, predominantly female cast. It's a mixture of genres and experiences to ensure a fun and compelling narrative for everyone. Great for fans of fantasy and high fantasy and urban fantasy and speculative fiction. Relatable on a variety of levels. It dives into topics of motherhood and complex family dynamics, worth and worthlessness, finding yourself, deals with homelessness and isolation, will appeal to fans of fantasy, adventure, action, and character-driven narratives. It's a coming-of-age story, it's the hero's journey, it's setting levels and expectations and not betraying the trust and relationships established with your audience.